Wow. Veronica, the Passion of the Christ.
I know.
What
Wow.
what did you think?
I mean, it was so overwhelming and like surprisingly like gory and violent. I did not think religious movies could be this violent.
Well, that's weird.
Really?
Huh. I get, that's what I'm used to, I guess, because the religion I was raised in it was a fairly violent religion.
Oh, really? I did not know that. What's your religion, if you don't mind me asking?
It's okay. I'm happy to talk about it. I was raised in Christolicism.
Oh.
That's a faith where once a year we take a pilgrimage back to the Holy Land of Camp Crystal Lake, and we pray to our one true God, Jason Voorhees. It's a beautiful religion, primarily about abstaining from recreational drugs and premarital sex. But the movies about our Messiah, Jason Voorhees, do tend to be fairly violent.
Jon, are you sure this is a religion?
I've been to a lot of conventions. Yeah, I think it's a religion. Here, let me read you some from the good book, The Passion of Jason.
Huh.
And lo, though the children mocked him, and the counselors lay with each other, and they drowned him, he still rose. And lo, though Corey Feldman put a machete in his head.
Corey Feldman is in the book?
Oh yeah, he's an important figure.
Huh.
He still rose. And lo, though the teenagers on the way to Manhattan flooded him with toxic waste,
Isn't that
he
Jason
still
in
rose.
Manhattan?
And though the psychic girl made a roof fall on his head, he still rose and went to space, and his body was rebuilt by nanobite technology.
Wow.
Amen.
Well, I mean, I guess, as a Scientologist, I shouldn't really judge.
Religions are all great. I think that is the moral of today's episode. Religions are fun, and the people who love them the most are the funnest of all.
Toot toot.
Toot toot.
Wow. That's a great one. So did you actually write these, or did you recite these from memory?
I wrote them in the good book. Here, it's very exciting. For those listening, for the first time ever, Veronica and I are recording a visual component of today's episode. We are recording this visually.
This is visual.
Yep. It's me slowly moving my hand up and down means visual. But it's very exciting. And of course, for our first visual episode, I chose to do an intro bit that involved a prop. Mostly so anyone watching visually can see my amazing improv object work. But no, I did not need to write them all down. I know what happened to Jason Voorhees in the Friday the 13th episode.
Wow. This is some grade A improvising.
Hello, everybody. Either
Hello.
listening or watching, if that's possible. I'm Jon.
I'm Veronica. I would love for this to not be a visual episode at the end of it all, and for you to have to remove all references to us recording this from the audio.
It would be so far from the first time that we had something in the audio that is clearly in reference to something the listeners have no idea what's going on.
That's true.
It doesn't matter.
Special.
And that's what makes this show special. But what is this show?
This show is called Box Office Time Machine. Hi. How many minutes are we in? And this is the first we mention it.
We're at hour 2, which is
okay.
usually the time we name the show.
Yes. This is Box Office Time Machine, where we talk about a number one movie at the box office this past weekend, or in a past weekend in the past, decades ago. Wow, this is the worst I've done this so far for video.
I always feel bad for messing it up, but it's harder than you think.
Yeah, we really need to nail a good one-liner.
I can tell you what happens to Jason Voorhees in every movie of the Friday the 13th series, but I cannot do the one-sentence description of the show we've been recording for 6 years.
6 years. That's wild. Good for us. So yeah, and today we're watching, or we have seen, an old movie. A very old movie. A movie from 2,000 years ago.
This actually was not a documentary, Veronica. The movie is actually 20 years old.
What?
Yeah.
It's not
No, this was not from the year 33 AD, I guess.
It's not recorded by Peter or other disciple, George.
No, they weren't there with GoPros.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll have to recalibrate, because I was giving it 5 stars because I was like, this is amazing. The quality of footage they captured in the year, I guess, is it the year 2000 or the year 033, or is it the year 0?
All I know is that Judas did use his 30 pieces of silver to get an Adobe Creative Cloud account so he could edit the footage. It was pretty cool.
And they kept charging him even after he committed suicide, those bastards.
Subscription methods, the first sin.
Yes, exactly.
We are talking about The Passion of the Christ. And, you know, this is a podcast about the number one movie at the box office. So we've done a lot of franchises. So let me start the way I start all these questions. Veronica, how familiar are you with this franchise? Were you a fan of the Jesus Man character as a kid? Did you see the earlier adaptations of his work?
No, I am not. I mean, I don't mind Jesus, I guess. I did not grow up with religion, so I'm familiar with Jesus as a concept. I'm half Jewish, like culturally, and I know that we are blamed for that. And I definitely heard that for his death. So I definitely heard that loud and clear. And I've enjoyed many, Renaissance paintings of Jesus. I love a magic trick, so that's good. Jesus Christ Superstar is very fun.
See, this is how you differentiate the two of us as hosts. I'm a Godspell fan.
Wow.
And you're a Jesus Christ Superstar fan.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Godspell, to be honest.
It's the better hippie Jesus musical. I'm sorry, it just is.
Well, actually, I would say the best Jesus musical is Rock Me Sexy Jesus from Hamlet 2, the Steve Coogan movie.
I think the best one is absolutely Bye Bye Birdie. And most people don't realize that Conrad Birdie is a Christ figure, but he is.
Wow. I never thought of that.
I think actually more than what my stupid joke question is, what is your history with this specific movie? Now, like you, I'm also half Jewish. Combined, we get one Christ killer. This movie really puts the proof to the whole not all representation is good representation idea. Yes. A lot of good roles for Jews in this movie. I wouldn't say it's great Jewish representation. But I remember, this is my first time ever seeing this movie. First of many. I'm going to pop it on, I'm sure, weekly now. But I remember when this came out 20 years ago when I was, 3.
Yeah, very young, an impressionable young age. That's why I couldn't see it in theaters 10 times.
Yeah, I was, you know what? There we go. I won't date I was not yet old enough to get an R-rated ticket, but I was old enough to. I was 17. I was 17 when this movie came out. Why am I fucking around? But I remember when this came out. As all the talk about it being anti-Semitic and that it was going to uh, um, build up a bunch of hate crimes against the Jewish people. And so I remember at the time being fairly down on Passion of the Christ, probably why I never saw it.
The propaganda worked on you. The Jewish propaganda against this movie really, really did a number on you.
They kept it from being released and making $580 million more than its budget at the box office.
It's the highest grossing foreign language movie, I think, still. Which is kind of a weird qualification. But yeah, it made an obscene amount of money.
It made a massive amount of money.
I think until The Joker, I would argue a better movie than this. It was the highest rated R-rated movie of all time.
Now that's a debate we could get into because we both hate Joker, but I think I hate Joker more. So
than
I would
this?
if I really hate Joker.
Oh my God. Okay.
Feel free to go back and listen to our Joker episode to hear me spit venom into the microphone.
I mean, I also did not enjoy Joker, but this was a
you
whole
loved
new
it. You
level.
got that tattoo.
Oh yeah, that tattoo of like, I want to fuck the Joker.
Yeah, it's not of a scene of the movie. It's not like him on the stairs. You just got the written text. I want to fuck the Joker.
Well, all of my tattoos are aspirational. It's like the secret with my body.
That's why we're started recording visually, so you can show off one tattoo per episode.
Good.
So stay tuned to that. Yeah. What? So this movie came out. I don't know. Where do we even fucking start with this? Well, I guess we can't say neither of us would consider ourselves practicing Catholics. So,
or lapsed Catholics.
Neither that either. I think there is. I was trying to come at this movie from a way of. I was trying to come at it, okay, as just a pure movie by itself. But very quickly, I realized that didn't work because this seems very dumb. It felt like going to see like an MCU movie if you only vaguely are aware that like Spider-Man exists, because there are constantly just characters appearing who the movie makes no attempt to introduce in any way. But like, oh, that lady wiping his face, I guess she's important.
Her name is Veronica, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Are you named after her?
Yeah, after that lady. My mom actually changed my name. My mom saw the movie in 2004 and went to the ID place or wherever and immediately changed my name.
Because your name before that was Harley Quinn.
Exactly. Yeah, because I want to fuck the Joker. The tattoo is actually, I was born with it.
It's a birthmark.
Yeah. Maybe she's born with it, and maybe she wants to fuck the Joker.
I will say I spent a lot of the time on my phone being like, is that? Huh. And everything that I looked up was apparently in the Bible, all the weird, odd shit.
Well,
I guess demon children hounding Judas. I guess that wasn't in there. But I liked the demon children. They were maybe my favorite part.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is to some extent like all in the Bible, but some of it isn't. I think the violence and the sort of the interpretation that he went with seems to be based a lot on an account of a nun from Vienna in the 19th century who also kind of came up with the blood libel of Jews put Catholic kids' blood in matzah. So she had this very graphic interpretation of sort of the trials of Jesus. And so I think, yes, like, obviously, I guess the original Gospels don't really describe the level of violence to that extent. And that was something that she came up with, did a research, talked to God about. But, so yeah, I think it's slightly disingenuous to say that it's all from the Bible. But yes.
Fair enough. And obviously, Mel Gibson comes from a very kind of extremist Catholic offshoot.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're
They
going to get into
basically
all...
don't. So in the, I forget what decade it was, either in the 1960s or 70s was
I think
when
it's the 70s. What is it, Catechism 2 or whatever?
Yeah, it was when, so a few things happened. So they started doing mass in English. That was one thing. But they also finally decided that the descendants of Jews are not to blame for the killing of Christ. It took them almost 2,000 years to say that. But anyway, the church that Mel Gibson is part of and that his dad is part of, who's also a Holocaust denier, fun fact, does not believe in that split. So they are still doing like Latin Mass. I think he actually built a church somewhere in upstate New York for himself and I guess the congregation, Mel Gibson. So yeah, that church is bizarre. So what were we talking about?
Well, so despite the fact that we're having a lot of fun dropping words like catechism, neither of us are biblical scholars. So I was trying to come at this as a pure movie, but then I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't work because it is clearly for people who already know this story.
Yeah. This is not like Harry Potter, where they don't explain what a hippogriff is or whatever, because you're supposed to know what that is. I actually...
Yeah,
your superhero analogy, though, definitely rang true for me, too, in a slightly different way. Because I think certain scenes, especially in the beginning, where Jesus does do some miracle adjacent things, like I think he like sicks snakes onto someone or something like that. It feels...
He stomps on a snake. No, that's the devil's snake.
Oh, I don't know. Anyway, he like does some stuff that it seemed like in the language of the movie that we were supposed to very clearly perceive it as heroic or epic. But having seen actual superhero movies, and I don't know, even like a Hercules cartoon, you're like, none of the stuff that he does is like super impressive to me. Like it is only impressive if you like really believe in Jesus. You know what I mean? Like even something like turning water into wine or whatever, it's not like, it's impressive if the person physically, chemically alters the composition of water and turns it into wine. Which is like, if you believe that's what Jesus did. But like, if someone does it as a magic trick, you're like, okay, well, that's cute. So it's like, it seemed like the movie wanted us to be impressed by things that if you're a non-believer, it's very hard to be impressed by, considering sort of the level of spectacle that we encounter in moviegoing these days. And I think that's why for me, it's also impossible to watch that movie without watching it as just a religious document or like a movie that's made for a very specific type of Christian.
You were like, I'm sorry, Jesus, I'm not impressed, because in Spider-Man 3, Peter Parker fights both Sandman and the New Goblin. So,
of course. Well, I'm a Spider-Man hater, so maybe I like Jesus more than I like Spider-Man.
People would be. I wonder what would anger people more: your hatred of Spider-Man or your disbelief in the Bible. Um, Holy wars are fought over Mr. Peter Parker.
I'm sure between
But
Marvel and Sony.
yeah, fighting over their claim over the Messiah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that is the thing. Like, we can't look at this as believers. We can't look at this movie as believers. And it's hard to look at this movie separated from the ugliness of its writer-director and the ugliness of its batshit insane star, which we can talk about later.
Oh, yes.
The whole thing about Mel Gibson's dad and his anti-Semitism. You know, we could talk about their extremist Catholicism. The fact that they don't believe in mass being in English probably has something to do with the fact that Mel Gibson did not want this movie to be subtitled. And their issues with Jewish people probably had something to do with the fact that he refused to take out the line where one of the Jewish high priests said something like, the blood belongs on me and all my children.
Yeah, at the end. So apparently
the studios
he
did not
actually
want them to keep that, but
it was
he kept
sneakier.
it. He took the subtitles out, but he kept the words.
Yeah, but he said that he did. So he was being sneaky about it. He thought no one will notice, but then people noticed. But hold on. So the movie was not subtitled when it came out? I watched it with subtitles.
Oh, no, it was. But he did not. That was a fight. He did not want it to be subtitled. Okay. And I think based on the success of this, I might be wrong. I didn't see it either. But I believe Apocalypto was not subtitled. Probably because after the massive success of this, he had sway. Although Apocalypto did not make as much money as this movie.
No.
It turns out you cannot make this amount of money if you don't have churches bussing their congregants in and telling them to go.
Or buying DVDs by the bulk that actually cost more per unit than buying individually.
We can talk about how this movie affected the sales and marketing of faith-based films all the way up until last year's The Sound of Freedom, the QAnon adjacent movie starring one Jesus Christ, Jim batshit insane Caviezel. So it's fascinating on that way, but I was really trying, at the end I was like, let me go for the Roger Ebert rule. I forget if it's Roger Ebert or Gene Siskel, but the rule of you cannot judge a movie based on its relationship to other movies. Judge it on what it is trying to do.
Right.
If a movie is trying to just be silly fun, don't try to evaluate it as if it's an art house film.
Mm-hmm.
So what this movie is trying to do clearly is depict in graphic detail the suffering of Jesus Christ before his crucifixion, so that true believers go, oh, damn, I thought the crucifixion was like a walk in the park. Now I'm like, whoa, he didn't just die for my sins. He hella died for my sins. And I guess it is effective on that level. However, my problem with this movie, and I was going with it for a while, is that it gets so fucking repetitious. At the time this movie came out in the mid-aughts, torture porn, the term, was super popular to describe all those post 9/11 horror movies like Hostel, yada yada, the French new wave, extreme new wave of horror films. And some people that did not like this movie used that same term to describe it, torture porn. And I never liked that term, torture porn. I thought it was dumb. But I think I now kind of understand what they were going for. Mm-hmm. And there's a thing where it's the difference between, this is going to sound so stupid, but the difference between film editing in a regular movie and a film editing in porn is that in a regular movie, every shot is supposed to hold new information. And in porn, the penetration might not have changed. You're just cutting back to it to continue to show the penetration. There might not be another emotional detail. You're just cutting back to a gynecological shot of a vagina. And I feel like it's very similar here because of all the pussy money shots. But no, because you just keep seeing flesh being torn without
Yeah.
learning anything new. It's just like, yeah, dude, then it happened again and
Yeah.
again
It
and
feels pretty
again.
indulgent for sure. It also, I mean, I guess that's sort of, I don't know. I'm no biblical scholar, but I was forced to study the Bible for many of my high school and pre-high school years. And so Bible stories are like this. They're very repetitive, or they say, and then it happened again to this person, and then it happened again to this person. And and if you go and do the Via Dolorosa, which you can do like in Jerusalem, like the sort of the stations of the cross, it is the same thing. Like every station is basically, this is where Jesus fell. And this is where Jesus fell again. This is where Jesus fell and someone wiped his face. This is where Jesus fell and like someone took. So all of that stuff is very repetitive. But I think what a movie should do is make that repetition interesting or make that repetition meaningful, or even do away with that repetition to make the same dramatic point in a more engaging way. And I don't think this movie did any of that. I think this movie was very much, and that's why I think this movie, it does not exist on the same plane as Hollywood movies. You know what I mean? It exists on a plane of understanding of Christian and religious movies, because and this is not my original thought, but I keep thinking back of like there was something like Chuck Klosterman wrote in one of his books where he was like somewhere in the deep south and he turned on the TV and there was a movie, a Christian movie on every network that he basically watched. And so one of the movies was about this kid in high school, and there are all these, and he's very religious. And there's these kids that are like doing drugs and having sex, and he's really struggling with that stuff. And in a Hollywood movie, what would happen, or the main conflict of this character would be like, how do I keep my Christian values and not be tempted by the peer pressure of my friends? This is not the dilemma of that movie. The dilemma of that movie for this kid is like, how do I save these people? Like, it's an entirely different mindset. And I think this movie, as we said, it's for already believers who have that mindset already. Like these people already believe that Jesus died for their sins. They already like believe that the gospels, they believe things probably to some letter of literality in terms of what happened. And so you have like the stuff that you present to them dramatically has to be different than a regular Hollywood movie would be. And
Yeah.
And it's so, but to me as a viewer, it's so frustrating because if you don't come at it from that perspective already, this movie is hollow and silly because it just doesn't make sense on an emotional level, if that makes sense.
No, totally. I think the big thing that makes it difficult to come at it as, you know, a non-devout Christian is that this movie's not made to be enjoyed. It is not.
Yeah.
It is made to be homework. It's made to be a badge of honor. It's not like, say, Christian music. Like to go to like Christian music. It's not like Christian rock, say, a music that is designed to take in the entertaining facilities to take it to utilize the entertaining conventions of secular music to bring in people to enjoy. No, this movie is like sitting down and listening to Gregorian chants.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be fucking unpleasant and boring. So then you can say to your friends, yeah, I'm so fucking holy. You probably don't curse in this case. I'm so holy that I listened to Gregorian chants for 8 hours today.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be fun. That's not the point. And it's not supposed to be entertaining to other people. It's supposed to be miserable and suffering. And so on that case, like, it's very hard to evaluate. So at the beginning, I was a little surprised. The movie starts, we see Jesus. It starts right before, this is like 12 hours. It's supposed to be just like 12 hours. It starts the night that Jesus is arrested.
Yeah.
He's hanging out with his merry men in Sherwood Forest. And
they do a little
he's
dance.
freaking out because he knows he's about to die. And we see, like, I didn't know this. I guess I didn't really know this part of the story. I always got the, I knew about the Last Supper, the one of you are going to betray me. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, Jesus was pretty chill about that. Like, he's like, oh God, this next part's gonna suck. But hey, my dad's kingdom afterwards. That'll be fun. So I always thought he would be a little more relaxed about his upcoming crucifixion. But no, we get there is a name for it. The something in the
the pig in a blanket. The
I don't know,
needle
but
in
it's
the haystack.
It's him like fully freaking out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, this is Jesus as a human. This is Jesus as a man. And I was like, oh, you know what? That will be much more, that will mean something to me. Because I can grasp onto the idea of historic Jesus, as a historic figure. I know crucifixions were
a form.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a real form of punishment. And I think all historians agree that, I might be wrong, but I believe all historians agree that a man named Jesus was a religious leader who was crucified.
I'm sure there's a fringe that doesn't, but yes, I think that is definitely a consensus opinion.
Yeshua. And so I'm like, okay, you know what? If this is a story about a true believer who is demanded to, who is demanded repeatedly to forsake his beliefs to stave off suffering, but who somehow finds the will not to do that, I could find that powerful. Hey, I watched Silence and I found it incredibly powerful. Silence is also, about the silence of God to that suffering. So that I'm like, okay, Jesus is just a 33-year-old dude who, the true miracle of this movie, somehow has a 34-year-old mother. I don't know how that happened.
It's immaculate.
I think that the actress Maya Morgenstern, who plays Mary, I think she was like 41 when this movie came out. I think in real life she would have been she was young. She was like a teenager when Mary.
Yeah, I guess so. She would have been in her late 40s, 50s? Probably 50.
In her late 40s.
Well, if she was a teenager, depending on how teenagey she was, Jesus died when he was 33, right? Famously. So,
okay. So
yeah.
she could have been late 40s, early 50s. Yeah. But this was Middle East late 40s.
Yeah.
So
this is like the sun damage should have been there,
But it's really like anytime you look, like there's a flashback of them horsing around as mother and son.
Oh, you mean when he invents the table? That was my favorite scene. My favorite scene also had my favorite, and by that I mean a pet peeve of mine, trope where someone brings up a concept from our current life and someone else says, oh, that will never take on, or they will never last. Like the famous Titanic scene, Picasso, he will never last. And in this one, Jesus creates, I assume, just the Western version of the table. I don't think Mel Gibson says that he invented also like the Japanese or the lower ones, and then and he shows it to Mary, and she's like, nah, this will never take on this table thing. And it was such a silly scene, and it's truly my favorite scene of the movie.
Yeah, that I was both confused because I was like, wait, what did he invent? Do they all sit on the ground? And so he's saying that it's not that he invented it. He's saying rich people have started like sitting at higher tables. I don't know the history of carpentry. I'm not a carpentry scholar, the same as I'm not a biblical scholar, but I was distracted. Like they're doing like, mother son stuff. And I'm like, dude, she's 2 years older than you, max. That is your sister or girlfriend. That is not your mom. But anyway.
I mean, she looks as old as his girlfriend, as portrayed by Monica Bellucci, right? Because they don't name anyone. That's another problem in this movie.
You are supposed to know whoever. Like, I don't know who. I could assume who the two Marys were. I didn't know who the guy who ran around with them was. I don't know if that's one of the apostles, clearly.
Well, there's also Devil Guy, which I think is a creative license. Like, the guy without the eyebrows.
We have androgynous devil.
But that's kind of, we go back to the same point that I made earlier, which is like the dilemma of this movie is not really a dilemma for humans or for non-religious humans. The dilemma is not like, oh my God, I have to face this thing. And do I even believe this strongly in my convictions in order to go through this ordeal? It is, oh, fuck, I won't be able to convince enough people, or, my legacy might not be what, I thought it would be, or whatever it is. I don't even know what his actual dilemma is.
Have you ever seen The Last Temptation of the Christ? To bring up another Scorsese movie. So I actually have not either. I've seen Silence, but I've never seen The Last Temptation. And apologies if I get this wrong, but from what I gather, The Last Temptation is very much Jesus as a man, as a human man. He's still Jesus Christ, but at the same time, he's a human. He's the Son of God in human form. And so as a human beings don't want to be crucified. That sucks.
Yeah.
And so he has a moment where the devil shows him. This is very controversial. The theaters had bomb threats and stuff.
Oh, wow.
When the Scorsese movie came out in '88. But he has a moment.
Cool, because religion is cool and level-headed.
Yeah. Religious, like I said at the beginning, the more religious you are, the more funner you are. But so the devil gives him a temptation of just forsaking all of this, like being like, you're right, I'm not the Son of God, and then just having a nice human life, having a wife, and growing old. And I haven't seen The Last Temptation, but I want to, and I think that would affect me more because that idea of, I don't know, it feels neither here nor there. It's not Jesus as benevolent superhero, basically Santa Claus Jesus, as like the nicest, sweetest dude in the world, but it's also not a human being Jesus Christ that I can relate to. We get a bit of that, and then he's just bloody face for how long was this movie?
It's 2 hours, blissfully not longer.
So long.
Well, I think part of it is that a lot of the stuff is telegraphed via slow motion. Anytime there's anything of import to say, the movie slows the fuck down. So like
Zack Snyder saw this movie.
Yeah, and it was like, this is for me. This is my aesthetic. But it was so slow to the point where the pirate website on which I watched this movie had the functionality of speeding up.
She means the place where she bought it legally.
Yeah, twice. I bought it twice. There was a way of speeding up the movie by 25%. I sped it up basically after the first maybe 20 minutes to 125. And it did not feel sped up. The movie felt like a regularly paced movie, somewhat. Like people were moving at a regular pace. There was no issues with dialogue sounding, up pitch or anything like that. So that is so weird. That has never happened to me before, where I speed something up and it feels still very natural. Maybe that's the miracle of Jesus Christ, but uh, it was so slow. It's just like so painfully slow to sit through. And if you're not enjoying yourself, which I was not, it felt like an ordeal. Maybe that was Mel Gibson's, maybe I still got the experience because I was suffering. I was also passioning through this, and it was the passion of Veronica to make it through this movie in one sitting.
What are the steps of the Passion of Veronica?
The steps are try to eat something. Maybe it'll give me something to do. All right, I'm done with food. How about some wine? Okay, I emptied out the bottle. Do I have any beer in the fridge? I get some beer. Okay, well, I guess I'm very drunk now. I'm gonna lie down on the couch and finish watching it. Those were the steps, Yeah, please come to my apartment every March to recreate my trials.
I am very exciting. I just got a new TV for the first time in 15 years. Very excited. I got it all set up. I was not thrilled that this is the first movie I watched on it.
I know. I told you to watch Mad Max Fury Road on it real quick to kind of.
I've now watched 2 movies on it. This and Demons 2 from an Italian horror film from the 70s. So 70s, sorry, 80s.
How dare
you? I had something. I was so curious after I said that joke about Zack Snyder. I was so curious if he's ever talked about this movie because Zack Snyder's debut was a year earlier with 2003's Dawn of the Dead. But I'm trying to remember. I haven't watched that movie in a long time. Obviously, there's speed ramping in that movie with the zombies running quickly.
Yes.
But I don't think there's any slow-mo. And after this movie, slow-mo has become such a part of Zack Snyder's visual vocabulary. And his whole thing with like the DC characters are like, let's treat them like gods. Let's make Superman Jesus. Not that he was the first person to do that. But I was curious if he's ever talked about this movie, because the whole time I was watching this movie, I just kept thinking, oh, this is a DC movie.
Oh, God. I feel like even the worst DC movie is not as bad as this. But I can definitely see in some of the visual palette of this movie how Zack Snyder could have been influenced by it for 300, though I suppose much of the visual style of that movie came from the comic book. That, well, slow-mo aside, but I think the color palette wise.
I mean, obviously, Zack Snyder has done interviews where he talked about the Christ stuff in Man of Steel, but I can't see anything about him specifically referring to this movie. When did Man of Steel come out? 2013. So like 9 years later.
I don't know. We didn't talk about it last year.
Oh, what a bummer. We missed it.
Well, it's okay. We'll always have the Justice League.
Well, no, we haven't. We've very purposely not. We haven't done any. Oh, we did Shazam, which I liked.
Yeah, Shazam was good. Shazam. Yeah.
Veronica, I don't know. So you liked the table scene. Was there anything? I could see how, to a true believer, watching Jesus' flesh be torn asunder would be powerful. I found the movie, eventually, I found it very mean-spirited. Yeah. Like, I felt the mean-spirited nature of what I assume, I don't know the man, but what I assume to be kind of Mel Gibson's vibe. And for me, the scene that it really crystallized this feeling was when Jesus is on the cross and we get the the famous story, like famous enough that I know
The
this
sounds
part.
of always look on the bright side of life kind of
Yep, yep,
are
yep. He starts
fading
singing.
in.
Eric Idle appears. But no, where he's got the two criminals on either side on two other crosses.
Hmm.
And one repents, one recognizes Jesus as being the Son of God and repents and gets to go to heaven, and the other doesn't. And I don't know that this is in the Bible. And I assume it's in some version,
Yeah.
because everything seems to be. But like, so the one dude's like, oh, this is just, I deserve to be crucified. First off, I don't think anyone deserves to be crucified. It seems very unpleasant and also difficult to do. I was
Yeah.
watching them trying to nail the things and put that up. I'm like, this seems like an incredibly inefficient way to kill someone. But so he gets, Jesus is like, hey, whatever you say, bro, I'll see you in heaven. And then the other guy's like, just laughs. And then instantly, the moment he does not repent to Jesus Christ, a crow flies down and pecks out his eye.
Yeah.
Just instantly. And all I felt was like, oh, this is what Mel Gibson and his collaborators think about any of us.
Oh,
Any
for
of
sure.
us that aren't devout Christians. That even like not just non-believers, but those that aren't Christian enough for some of these people, that we
Hmm.
deserve to have a crow fly down and peck out our eyeball instantly.
Yeah.
No, say, I don't know, Christ-like forgiveness, just an instant pain and suffering. And that is the kind of stuff that really just made me find this movie a little bit ugly.
Yes. No, I mean, for sure. There's so much ugliness in the movie. And I can grok how some of it is intentional, all that Jesus goes through, all the violence that he goes through is there to make a point. Like, look, this is what dying for your sins looks like. And this is what he endured in order to save us Christians. But it is also so mean spirited about basically everything else. I mean, I guess maybe we can talk about the depiction of Jews in this movie, but these, like, obviously, again, we don't know what Jews looked like or did back then, really, outside of like the Gospels or the Bible or whatnot. But this level, like, their characterization in this movie is straight out of either a Mel Brooks movie caricature where he would have like some dancing rabbis or like a Nazi cartoon. Like they look so stereotypical. It's almost like they need like one of them to be holding like a globe and the other one needed to be holding like a sack of money and like to
It's just
complete the
like just
picture.
editorial cartoon text over their chest that just says American Jewry,
Yeah, it was, and the way that they talked was so uh like bloodlusty too. It really he and And the fact that this movie depicts Pontius Pilate, like a very historically, famously ruthless and brutal dictator of that land at that time, as sort of the compassionate, like, man torn between those bloodthirsty Jews who are just forcing his hand so much to kill this man who he seems to secretly believe is the Messiah, is so ridiculous. That part is definitely not historically accurate whatsoever. And that is a way of Mel Gibson really kind of like underlining the Jews did it. The Jews are complicit. It's like, it's all their fault. And it's also kind of strange because this movie talks about, Jesus himself talks about the fact that this is a prophecy. This is all preordained. Like, he has to die he has to be crucified in order for, basically to die and for Christianity to begin. Like, so if that is the case and it's all foretold, do the Jews even have any agency in this situation? And if they actually don't agitate to kill Christ and Christ does not die, is there Christianity at all? There's so many conflicts within the way that it's being presented in the movie. And I think that's also kind of like a conflict within sort of the lore of Christianity to begin with, is that, like, how much agency did any of these people have if what we believe is that the Lord wanted this to happen? He wanted his son to travel down to earth so that he would be sacrificed and showed to the people the true way.
Was Judas entrapped? Was this entrapment on the case? I also had that problem. It's like, and I think you're right. This is an issue that secular people have with the thing of, like, if this was all on purpose, and isn't, like, Judas just playing his role?
Yeah.
But I was looking up to see what the historical idea of Pontius Pilate's wife is, because
Claudia, is that her name?
Yeah, there's a weird thing with this movie where, on one hand, it's like, oh, this is so real. This is so real. There was a huge controversy when this movie came out because there was reported, I think Peggy Noonan reported a quote from Pope John Paul after a screening where he said, "It is as it was." And that was heavily quoted and used in marketing.
Of course, because he traveled back in time and knew exactly how it was.
Yeah. Well, apparently, I don't know for a fact, but the Vatican started to remove themselves from that quote and step aside from it. I think what happened is they realized it was not great for the Pope to be used in the marketing of a film. So they're like, he didn't say that. The Pope. Yeah, they're like, that's not what we're doing. But so that was clearly some marketing. Like, this is what actually happened. And yet it's still got the most movie bullshit of, like, oh, the good people are hot and the bad people are ugly and dirty. It's like, this is a world where God allows the good mom to look 30 and all the bad people to have dirt on their teeth.
Yeah.
Jesus and all his buddies have perfect chompers, while all the bad people have grimy, gross teeth. And that goes with, the depiction of the Jews. And then also, a lot of the controversy when this came out was about the depiction of Pontius Pilate. And because the movie very much, like you said, sets it up that, oh, Pontius Pilate's just a good dude, and his hot wife is like, oh, don't kill that guy, he's awesome. And Pontius is like, how about this, guys? What if I just don't kill him? It'll be okay. And the Jews are like, no, kill him. And I don't know. It's a problem that I don't know. I don't know enough as a scholar to know how.
I mean, it's part of the historical record that whoever was, like, the ruler of the Roman Empire at the time removed him from Jerusalem because he was too brutal. Like, he was known as, like, a very brutal guy. So to all of a sudden paint him as this sort of conflicted guy who's really just being peer pressured into this, but the vile Jews, it's just, like, it doesn't need to necessarily be there in order for the other part of the Jesus story to, like, you can still keep all the violence and the brutality you want. And he does depict the Roman Punisher guys.
Yeah.
Very brutal. I mean, he revels in that scene where even in the 1.25 speed, it felt like it was 20 minutes of just Jesus being bludgeoned and close-ups of his skin rapturing. It was horrifying. And then to me,
That's
even worse when they kind of nailed the crown of thorns into his skull. It was all just so graphic. And clearly, I'm not saying that only the Jews are depicted in a bad light, but that was a choice, because this was definitely like, while yes, it's probably like widely accepted that the Jews, gave up Jesus, Pontius Pilate not being an active part in his demise is also a pretty sort of consensus opinion. And the fact that Mel Gibson decided not to depict it as that tells you something. It tells you where he wants the blame to lie.
There's a thing in like, okay, so if you're doing a story, if you're making a movie about a historical event, and there are elements in what actually happened that could, by just their depiction, seem to reinforce negative and harmful stereotypes, you have to be careful about how you depict them. Like, let's say you're depicting a story about a crime, and maybe a character of some minority committed a crime in real life. Well, then you would choose to, I don't know, get into the circumstances of how that minority community was being oppressed, how that character was impoverished or something. Or easier, I don't know, just have characters from that ethnic group who are not criminals, to show that you are not saying that blank people are all like blank. This one individual maybe was. There are ways you can tell a story and depict a story that makes it clear that you are not painting with a broad brush. And whatever you want to say about his motivation, I think it's fair to say that Mel Gibson did not choose to take a number of avenues that would have made the depiction of the Jews in this movie softer and less ugly. I know,
if anything, isn't there one Jew in one of the early scenes that is like, hey guys, maybe we shouldn't like be this bad, and the mob basically eats him alive and he's never seen again. And like,
that is, I think there are moments like that. There's an easy way for someone who loves this movie to defend it against claims of anti-Semitism and say like, oh, the Roman soldiers were the ones who were hitting him, or, oh, Jesus is Jewish, people call him rabbi, or, oh, there's that dude you talked about. But it's so, as far as I can tell, again, not a scholar, in the Catechism 2 or whatever, one of the things was about the depiction of the Passion and how it should be depicted. And one of the things are like, you should not show anymore is bloodthirsty crowds, because that is what is used primarily to blame Jews as a whole for the crucifixion. The showing of bloodthirsty Jewish crowds demanding this man get killed. And that is the stuff that this movie runs towards with open arms. For decades, people had thoughts about how to tell this story in a way that would not incite violence towards modern day Jewish people. And the same way Mel Gibson's father in his faith turns against that advice, in his depiction, Mel Gibson does the same thing.
Right. And I think that's another kind of counter to your Martin Scorsese example with The Last Temptation of Christ, where, again, I have not seen the movie, but yes, what I know about it is that it was a hot potato when it came out, because it kind of
That's how they described it.
They did depict Jesus as more of a conflicted person. And I think that sort of underlines the contrast between these two men. One movie was made by a man who clearly is conflicted about his religion, is trying to reckon with what it means to be Catholic, while also like seeing maybe the wrongs and hypocrisy of religion. And there's one man who is certain. This man knows that what he believes in is true, and nothing will sway him because he's on his like righteous warpath. And one makes probably for a fairly interesting movie, and the other one makes for this violent gore fest that we saw. Like, there's no room for nuance here. There's no room for any sort of hesitation. There's no room for anyone having conflicting ideas or thoughts and trying to reconcile them. It's all just, this is the way. And because it's made for people who also perceive it as such or might not speak out against it for those reasons, it worked for those people, I think. Because it was like, here is the way that we are taught, and it's shown with this way without any sort of like dissension or like murky ideas. So I'm pretty like, to me, like I certainly understand the success of this movie with a certain demographic, but it, for those reasons, it really did not work for me.
Yeah, this is not a movie about doubt in any way. I think, I don't know about you, but I think to me personally, as a not someone whose life is not really, well, where religious faith is not a part of my life, the thing that makes faith important is the existence of doubt. You know, faith doesn't mean anything unless it is the overcoming of doubt. But there is no doubt in this movie. It's just the overcoming of physical grotesquerie.
Yeah, exactly. And it also, I mean, this is on a totally different tangent, but as I was watching this, I was kind of shocked that it was directed by an Oscar-winning like movie director. It looked so shoddy. And I was so, that is actually another thing that I think it does have in common with the Christian cinema, is that it looks as bad. I was like, it was shocking to me that it was directed by Mel Gibson from just a competency level and not by, like, I don't know, Kirk Cameron's cousin. Or it was, especially at the end, this movie cost $25 million, which maybe not enough to do good visual effects. But at the end, the earthquake is literally them shaking the camera.
It looks a bit like the earthquake in like Universal Studios.
Yeah, or when in the Jewish temple, there's some sort of
that
like
part where the
like
ground
the earth
in the temple
opens up.
separates. That the most felt to me like I was on the Universal Studios tram tour.
Yeah, it did not even have that level of competency in many ways. Like, the only thing he was competent about is depicting the violence. Like, that was like expertly made. And everything else was very, very shoddy. Like, people overacting to unreasonable amounts. Like, the guy who played the Barabbas guy, the criminal who gets pardoned.
I'm a murderer.
What the hell was that? What was that depiction?
That appeared to be Bluto from the Popeye cartoon.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, this is a cartoon. He should have like flies flying like over his head to indicate how stinky he is. It was it just seemed like no one was super directed to do anything either other than being just very, you know, exaggerated caricatures of whatever type they're supposed to be.
I'll disagree with you on some of that. I thought visually it was, I thought there were some striking shots in it visually. I didn't mind like the shot composition. And, you know, this was, as a kid, I loved Braveheart. I watched it a little older and I was like, some of it's great. I rewatched it a little older. I'm like, some of this is very dumb. But as a kid, I fucking loved it. I watched it all over and over. I used to do impressions of his, I loved ya, always have, or something. I forgot what the actual line is.
I have no idea what that is. They can't take away our freedom? Is that him? That's like
that
when
is, it ends identically.
Okay.
But But like that movie cost, around 70 million. This cost 20 to 30 million. So yeah, it was a cheaper film. It's still that's not a cheap movie, but it's, for a historical epic, it's definitely not that expensive. This is
I
not like
guess. But it's not like they
this
had
isn't
any
the 200
stars.
million that Scorsese used for Killers of a Flower Moon.
Right.
Uh,
But it's not like they have. I mean, Monica Bellucci is probably the biggest star at the time
mhm.
of the making of this
Yeah.
movie. And she was probably on set for like 2 days. I don't know. She was like,
Well,
hey,
yeah,
can you say this Jewish prayer for no reason? That was one scene. And every other
I
scene is just like hug Mary.
I did not mind the visuals of the movie. I did not. I thought they looked fine. The weird thing
Yeah.
that you said about like the operatic performances, I think that is very much was probably in service of his original idea, which existed during production, of that there would be no translations.
I
So the
guess.
actors had to kind of get their ideas across in overly done performances because they're assuming the audience isn't going to understand what they were saying. I don't
Yeah.
mind that. However, at the same time, that goes against what seems to be the one main draw of this movie is that it's supposed to be historically accurate. And you can't be historically accurate when all the characters act like they are straight out of a like British Christmas pantomime.
Yeah. And there was no double entendres and naughty jokes. Yeah, it was bizarre. I am kind of curious about like his intention was with foregoing any subtitling. Did he intend for people to get the vibe, or did he actually want those who do speak Aramaic or Latin or whatever to understand what was being said? Because I would argue all of those people are like bad at saying the words that they're supposed to be saying. Like I like even the Hebrew prayer that they did was like indecipherable. Like if I didn't have like subtitles, I would not know what they were saying. The level of pronunciation in this movie is. Do you remember the movie Jesus Camp, where
Oh
it was
yeah,
that
yeah.
documentary
That's
where
the evangelical documentary.
yeah, so it was a documentary about this woman who runs a camp to indoctrinate uh, Christian children to be even more radical, to kind of go toe to toe with radical Islam. But anyway, there's a scene in that movie where they're encouraged to speak in tongues, and you can see clearly like the kid, like it's hard because you're making that up, right? It's not really a thing, but they sound the way that people attempting to speak in tongues sounds exactly like this movie. Like the Aramaic in this movie sounds exactly like someone attempting to speak in tongues in an in a not an Episcopalian at a evangelical church. It was so jarring. It was so silly. I know I hate to be Veronica accent cop, but it was really bad.
Well, Aramaic is Aramaic's a dead language, right? Yes.
Yes. I mean, it's some, I think like there's obviously like text written on it, and I assumed he got like some sort of, but anytime they spoke in Hebrew, it was bad. It was like worse than the way Russian terrorists speak in like Mission Impossible movies. It
Yeah,
was truly awful.
but I think it's like speaking, Vulcan or Dothraki, like
Right.
if it's a
No,
dead
but
language, it just needs to sound good. It does, like no one's gonna speak it. But I think his thing about the lack of subtitles, I think that comes from his what he was raised in, like
Latin
his father's
mass.
beliefs.
Latin
Yeah,
mass.
that mass should be in Latin. His father, Hudden Gibson. I'm flipping through his Wikipedia. Very fun.
How's the
He had a
controversy
bunch.
section?
He wrote a bunch of self-published periodicals with titles like "Is the Pope Catholic? The Enemy is Here."
Wow.
Stuff like that.
Is
Like
the Pope Catholic a thing you say like when something is super obvious, right?
Oh yeah, I guess so. I guess that's kind of a.
I feel
Yeah,
like that might have been missed on him.
He thought the Second Vatican Council was a Masonic plot backed by the Jews.
Of course, of course.
He appears to maybe have also thought that September 11th was perpetrated by the Jews, and
Oh
he
yeah,
definitely
I
believed
heard
that the
about that.
Holocaust was fake. But
John, were you not
but yeah.
getting that in the Jew newsletter about like recent
the
accomplishments?
Jews letter?
Yeah, the Jews letter. 9/11, good job. Well done. Yet another plot to control the universe successfully
It
achieved.
rules controlling the Pope is so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. But yeah, I think that's part of it. He was raised to believe that if you're raised to believe that mass should be that there shouldn't be any attempt to welcome people into mass, then why not also make your movie unwatch
Understandable.
why not also make your dialogue completely incomprehensible?
But it was so silly because there was no. Could you tell when someone was speaking Aramaic as opposed to when someone was speaking Latin, or when someone was speaking Hebrew?
But that might be more of a me thing. Like,
no,
I also couldn't tell the
so.
difference
I
between.
think they were spoken exactly the same way. They were just spoken like, like I said, people speaking in tongues. It was like it was very silly. I mean, I understand that inclination to do that. That's clearly not the worst thing about this movie, but I just found it very silly that he was like,
you found the Hebrew also incomprehensible?
Yeah. Did
they seem like non-native speakers? It was all like taught phonetically.
Yeah, I don't think any. Well, I know that the woman who plays Mary, I think, is actually Jewish, but I don't think. I think most of the actors were Italian, so I would not be surprised if very few of them or any have had any exposure to Hebrew in any context.
Seems like Maya Morgenstern. She was raised in Romania and she speaks Romanian, certainly.
No, but I think I went on her Wikipedia and it says that she is Jewish. So I mean,
she is Jewish. Okay, yeah, but no, she as well, like the other actors, she learned her lines phonetically.
Yeah,
it says on her Wikipedia.
But it just seems like there wasn't, and maybe they didn't feel that it was important. But I don't think there was an emphasis on like, yes, okay, yeah. At least like in Star Trek, when people speak Vulcan, they all sort of sound the same. Like you can gather that this is the same language that those people speak. To me, it just felt like every character kind of sounded like it was speaking its own language in some ways. Because there was not a lot of, like unifying I guess dialect that I was able to grasp.
Oh, she's also a singer who performs like Jewish songs, so maybe she does speak Hebrew. Or
I mean, she might speak Yiddish, which is actually more close to German than it is.
She's been in a ton of movies in a lot of different languages. So, well, she didn't speak Aramaic. She's been in French films, Romanian films, Hungarian films. She seems charming. And also, she was 30 years old. But she was actually not 30 years old. But she was in her early 40s when they made this. It's so hard to evaluate this movie not as a true believer. In the same way that the recent film of Jesus Christ himself, Jim Caviezel, Sound of Freedom, that's not a movie to be evaluated as a movie. It's not a movie to be enjoyed. It's a movie to go as homework and then buy a bunch of tickets for empty theaters to AstroTurf the box office.
Well, I think kind of like this movie too, it's a movie that's made for a very specific audience. It's made for an audience that already knows that there is a pedophile conspiracy. And so there's nothing to kind of just evaluate about that statement. There's no kind of critiquing it or even questioning it. That is fact. And if that is the fact, and there is like this global conspiracy to kidnap children, maybe through the website Wayfair. Like, you are already on that page, and now what do we do about it? So I feel like in that way, it's actually pretty similar to a religious movie or a movie aimed at a religious audience. Do you want to do a quick rundown of the greatest hits as to why Jim Caviezel is a crazy person? Because I don't know that a lot of people know about this, but you and I have talked about this in the past.
I mean, I could try. I'll do a very brief. What people should do, if people are genuinely interested in this, they should look up an episode of the wonderful podcast QAnon Anonymous. Don't worry, it is a podcast about conspiracies, not a conspiracy podcast. Yeah. In case you were concerned,
conspiracies, not for conspiracies.
Yeah, but they had an episode called I believe it's called Into the Cavortex.
It's a two-parter, I believe.
Well, they had a sequel that is about after when The Sound of Freedom came out, because the first one came out while Into Sound of Freedom was being on the shelf for many years while the film studios were trying to figure out what the fuck to do with it before Disney sold it to a faith-based studio that made a lot of money buying tickets for empty movie theaters. But you should definitely listen to that episode if this intrigues you. But basically, Jim Caviezel is crazy. In that episode, the stories from that episode come from people who worked with him on Person of Interest, the network procedural drama that he was on for many years. Some highlights were, by the end of the series, all action scenes involved his character wearing a mask, like a ski mask, because that's not Jim Caviezel, because they learned that he would just physically assault actors because he may or may not believe he was the actual character. 2, also driving scenes. They could not have him drive a car because he would just gun his car up to people. 3, the term Into the Cavortex, that's what crew members called it, when he would just come up to you and talk at you for long periods of time about nonsense with his incredibly intense gaze. 4, he said a lot of racist stuff. At one point, a network executive of Asian descent came to set.
Oh yeah,
and
that's
he
one of my
began
favorites.
talking to her. He began talking to her in basically ching-chong racist gibberish. Not just because he's racist, but because he seemed to mentally believe that he could speak another language.
That's so
he could
wild.
not. And if you've watched any clips of him, unfortunately, he does seem mentally ill. I say this as someone who loved the movie Frequency as a kid. Unfortunately, Mr. Caviezel does seem severely mentally ill. Any interview of him talking about Sound of Freedom, he's about to cry. He has also gone fully down the QAnon rabbit hole. Listen to that episode. If you're also interested, just a few days ago, I was watching this yesterday, the YouTube channel, The Morbid Zoo. I don't have the name of the woman in front of me now, but she had a video about the marketing of Sound of Freedom, which is really, really interesting, and kind of talking about how that works as the faith-based movie worked as like the audience had to see it, whereas like she compares it to the conservative exploitation movies made by the Daily Wire, why those have kind of all come and gone and failed, whereas this faith-based movie has made a shit ton of money. But that's a fascinating video. That video's, it's very interesting. It's not that funny. She's charming. She's absolutely charming and funny. But like, if you want to laugh, listen to that podcast episode.
John, I think you missed one of the funner facts about this too, is that he also refused to learn his lines. And so what they would do is that he would force the actor he was acting against to have a Post-it notes of his dialogue, like just glued to their forehead. And that seems insane.
If you watch the clip in that YouTube video I talked to again, the Morbid Zoo, the video is called "Sound of Freedom in the Shape of Modern Propaganda." There are clips of him talking about Sound of Freedom where he's clearly like reading something, but he's gotten very good at masking reading and disguising that as fervor, like religious fervor. So he will talk and I'll read I'll read a an email here the way he reads it. This email was sent from a notification only email address that cannot accept incoming email. Please do not reply to this message.
I mean,
so
some people, John, would argue that this is acting. Giving emotion to text.
That is true. And it only works. He thinks he's been blackballed by Hollywood for his religious faith and not because he's mentally ill. But yeah, if that's the only way you can deliver your dialogue, there aren't a ton of roles you can be cast in.
Yeah, I remember. So when this movie came out, I thought that like my impression of Jim Caviezel for some reason was like, oh, I feel bad for this poor man being in the center of all of this controversy. Like, because I think I saw him in like The Count of Monte Cristo, and I was like, I did not like that adaptation. I don't think it's actually very good, but at the time, I was like, yeah, it's the guy from High Crimes and The Count of Monte Cristo. And he didn't have anything better to do. And like, this was the best offer that he could do. So it was just an acting job for him. And why is he being ragged, for being in this movie? And now, obviously, knowing what I know about Jim Caviezel, I'm like, no. That is the movie he wanted to make. He did not want to make The Count of Monte Cristo.
Truly, folks, listen to that podcast episode. It is right up there with the Behind the Bastards episodes about Steven Seagal as just wonderful podcast dissection of a very, very damaged, famous actor.
Yes.
I think we can leave it at that.
Yeah.
As we're promoting other podcasts.
Yes.
I don't know how to rate this movie. Like, I'm going to say this.
I do, but
if you're a devout Catholic who just wants to, like, I don't know, sit and shake and cry while you watch a movie and then brag to all your friends about how religious you are because you watched this movie, A+. Now I'll give my rating of my own personal enjoyment. How about that?
All right. Let's do that. 3, 2, 1. F.
C-.
D-?
I said C-.
Oh my God. That's like, no, this is terrible. I can't believe this. I can't believe you gave this a passing grade.
I think the big thing we disagreed on is that I thought it was competently made.
No,
that's my competency grade, C-. You want it to be D+? Will you feel better if I at least give it put in the D range?
I'll feel good about D-. See, look at me being Jewish, trying to coerce you into a decision that you don't want to make.
So if you're just listening and you're not watching the visual version of this episode, which we might not even post. This is an experiment. We're going to see how it goes.
Fun fact.
I'm going to edit it and see if it looks good. But yeah, if you're just listening, you didn't see, to get me to change my grade, Veronica just tossed me a bag of silver, 30 pieces of silver. However, she tossed it to me in slow motion. So it still hasn't gotten to me yet. But it is going to spill on the ground. And as a Jew, I am going to dive for it, as I want to do. That is... Growing up, that's like the main kind of anti-Semitism I ever faced was jokes about like, oh, you drop a bunch of pennies and see the Jews scramble. So that slow-mo shot of Judas diving for his pieces of silver, that was like the one where I was like, but like at the same time, I get it visually. That's a good way of showing how pathetic this act is. Yada yada yada. I don't know, guys. Look, if you haven't seen this movie, you're not gonna fucking watch it. I went 20 years for watching it. I would have gone my entire life without watching it if it wasn't for this podcast. If you are not a true believer and you're not, I don't know, writing a thesis paper about faith-based movies or the filmography of Mel Gibson, there's no reason to see this movie if you're not a true believer.
In fact,
it's
stay away. Don't give it views. Even on pirate sites, don't give this movie views.
You know what? If you are maybe a makeup effects person who wants to do it, I don't know. How about that? How did you feel about the gore effects? Let's completely pull it out of the movie.
All right.
Did you
think
the
it was
gore
effective?
Was effective?
It was fine. All right, John, what have you seen lately that's not The Passion of the Christ that you liked?
Well, like I said, I saw Demons 2.
On a brand new
Demons
TV.
2, I think a few months ago, I saw Demons 1. These are, wait, so was the first one made by Mario Bava? Or were they both? Oh, they were both made by Lamberto Bava. These were from the mid 80s. They both have a similar premise. They're made in Italian with dubbed English dialogue. But like everyone's speaking English, but like clearly with dubbed audio. But in the first one, it's a bunch of people trapped in a movie theater that is screening a print of a movie that turns people into demons. And it's nonsensical, and the rules kind of make no sense. But I did genuinely enjoy the first one's kind of like all these different characters. Like there's like the college girls, there's the boys they think are cute, there's a pimp with his two sex workers. But like I love a bunch of disparate characters are in a setting with monsters. Like I love that kind of thing. In this movie, it's now an apartment building. With like the people who are having a party. There's a gym downstairs, all the people who are working out. And I enjoyed it on that case. Also, the boldness that they decided that after the first movie, apparently like that entire city was walled off and given over to the demons. I found that amusing. In the end, though, I think I preferred Demons 1. But hey, I liked them both more than The Passion of the Christ.
Yeah, it's a difficult second album problem. Anything else?
Since our last episode, oh my God, yes, I finally saw American Fiction.
Oh, that was good. I liked American Fiction.
Yeah, I liked it. There were I know a lot of people had issues about kind of the difference between the satire stuff and the family stuff.
I did not.
At its worst, and I liked the movie a lot. I didn't love the movie, but I liked it a lot. At its worst, it did kind of feel, there were times where I was like, oh, we could push the satire stuff more. It did kind of at times feel like two great flavors that maybe didn't mix perfectly. But I do think like at the times when they mixed well, it was great. And I thought both of them were handled very well. I loved the performances. Jeffrey Wright, of course. Sterling K. Brown is great. I loved the subplot about the older couple getting married.
Yeah, that was very sweet.
That stuff I liked the most. Yeah, all in all, maybe it didn't completely come together for me, but I still, I enjoyed it a lot.
Nice. Yeah, I liked it too. I think, I have similar thoughts too. I actually wish the satire was maybe like slightly like going for it more. Whereas like the family stuff, I actually thought was very well done and executed.
I
I
I
had less
wonder if
qualms over that.
that would have, if they pushed satire more, it would have made the break between the two tones feel weirder.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
maybe.
Like it was really the end, and I won't spoil the ending, but the ending feels like the ending to a pure satire movie.
True.
And didn't necessarily feel like the right ending to what is much more of a family drama.
Yeah, that's true. Though I did appreciate the ending went for it in some ways. I kind of liked it. I did not expect it. So, it was good. But yeah, good. Well, for me, I watched Drive Away Dolls or Away Dykes, as it was originally called, apparently. And
Why did they make them change that title? I'm shocked.
It was kind of a similar thing as American Fiction. This is not satire, but I definitely liked the romance between the two women felt more or better realized than the comedy. It felt fairly oddly paced for a comedy. I thought it felt like there were some jokes that should have hit better, but for some reason, like maybe the timing of the editing or something was not quite there, which is odd because the woman who directed it also edited it. But yeah, so it was not perfect.
Wait, you mean
sorry?
The woman who co-wrote it?
And I think she also directed it.
Yes, Trisha Cook.
Yeah.
So that was directed and co-written by Ethan Cohen. He wrote it with his wife Trisha Cook, who also edited it.
Yes. So yeah, it just felt. Also, I mean, obviously, it's kind of hard because I can't help but sometimes compare these two Coen brothers movies, and it was definitely not at that level at all. Not even like Lady Killers level. Well, I think Lady Killers was funnier. This was probably had better characters, maybe.
I guess the question is which is better. There's two movies to compare it to. Obviously, Joel Coen's solo
it's
project,
either Macbeth
or you could also compare it to the other current lesbian crime thriller comedy, Love Lies Bleeding.
Is that a comedy?
I haven't seen either yet.
The trailer made it seem very dramatic, but maybe sort of exploitation-y. But yeah, I have not seen it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I like that. I watched before the Oscars, I watched the animated shorts as this tradition. I liked like 3 of these. I liked Our Uniform and I liked 95 Senses. Our Uniform was very well made and like very cool. It was about the hijab and how Iranian schoolgirls are sort of dealing with the modesty police and what their view of the fact that they have to wear it. And I thought it was very, like the animation of it was very cool. 95 Senses is made by the guy who made Napoleon Dynamite, which is pretty crazy. But I thought it was a very well done, and it has like kind of a record scratch twist, which was not expected, but I thought it worked. And there was one movie that they added that was not actually nominated called I'm Hip, which was made by the guy who co-directed basically all of my favorite Disney movies. Like John Musker, he co-directed Hercules and Aladdin and Little Mermaid. And I guess that's the state of hand-drawn animation that he now makes shorts. But it was pretty cute. It's basically about a cat who sings about how hip he is. But the reality does not necessarily correspond with what we're seeing or what he's saying. And then I saw The Taste of Things, the big snub of the foreign language category this year. And it's a movie about a chef and his cook in sort of, I would guess, like end of 19th century France. It's never super clear and how they sort of work together and maybe fall in love. And I thought it was a very beautiful movie. I mean, to look at, it was delicious. It's food porn, essentially, but so beautifully staged. And a lot of it is just like people talking in parables a lot of the time over food. So, I mean, that could be, your mileage might vary with your tolerance of that. But I thought all the food stuff and the romance really put it over the top. And finally, I saw the Japanese movie Cure. Have you ever seen it? It's a J horror movie mystery from
Cure.
97. So it's made by the guy who made Pulse later. It's interesting. I would compare it thematically to something like It Follows, though it's definitely a very different depiction of that, a similar idea. But to me, I actually did not find it super, super engaging. I was also pretty sleepy when I watched it, so maybe that was part of it. But it just felt that the reveal of the movie was less interesting the more I thought about it.
I've not seen Cure, but Pulse affected me quite a lot when I saw it in college.
Well, I'm definitely in the minority with even this opinion. I think it's a very highly rated movie. Mm-hmm. I think most people really like it. It has over a 4. It has a 4.2 on Letterboxd. So I'm definitely in the minority opinion, but maybe I just was not in the right mindset to watch it. So that's all I saw.
All right. Well, what do we've got? What do we have coming up?
Well, so I'll be going to Japan for like 2 weeks, but afterwards, hopefully the thing that we'll have going would be Civil War. The new
we are sticking. I swear, folks, we are sticking to our New Year's resolution of a good release schedule. However, Veronica's going out of the country for 2 weeks, so we're kind of shifting.
By 1 week.
We watched this movie last week, but yeah, this episode should have come out last week, and we're gonna be 2 weeks till the next episode. But yeah, is that Civil War? Do we think it's gonna be number 1, or is it gonna be A24's big bomb?
I don't know. That's a good question. I hope that it does well. I mean, I guess, I don't know. Maybe.
I feel like a lot of everyone, you hear tons of people being like, "Oh, I'm excited for that," or saying, "God, I so do not want to see that." And I feel like sometimes that is the kind of divisive feelings that leads to a hit.
Yeah, true.
Because it's we'll see what the response is. Is there anything else coming out that week?
I think it's one of the only wide releases that week, but the previous week has Monkey Man, which is opening
I'm
wide.
excited for that. I heard that's great.
But there's an M. Night Shyamalan project, but apparently
is that his daughter's movie?
It's limited release. Maybe it just says entitled M. Night Shyamalan project. Maybe it's not even coming out. Maybe it's like a weird box office mojo bug.
Oh, it might be. I know his daughter has a movie.
Is that the one with the mirror thing?
I don't recall. What is her name?
And there's the Omen movie coming out
as The Watchers. That's coming out in June.
Yeah, so I think that's not it. Maybe it's a bug. There's the Omen movie, which I think actually has a pretty cool trailer, but that's also coming out in limited release, which seems odd. And the week before that, we have Godzilla X Kong New Empire. So, I mean, if that movie has legs, I guess it's not entirely inconceivable that would still be number 1.
We'll see. I'm hoping it's not. As much as I liked, is that it's like the is it that Wingard? Alex Wingard? Is it Alex Wingard or Adam Wingard?
I think it's Adam.
Is that who? Yeah, it's Adam Wingard. I loved The Guest, and I like Your Next a lot. I still have not seen their Blair Witch movie.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen it.
But like Godzilla versus Kong was fun, but that's not really my thing. Did we do an episode on that?
Yeah, we did. I think you and our guest, because that was in the brief period that we did guests, liked it. Well, I was kind of less.
Yeah, I liked it fine. In a world where Godzilla -1 exists, I just don't know that I can go back to the stupid cartoon kaiju battles. It's just not really for me.
I think the only one in the new sort of Kong Godzilla verse movie that I liked was Skull Island. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but
Skull Island was fun.
That was not the same guy.
But hey, we'll see in 2 weeks. You're going to Japan to meet the real Godzilla.
Yeah, I'm gonna fight Godzilla. You know, they
really?
need me. Yeah, they need me.
King Kong tagged you in?
Yeah. I'm gonna go into my giant Pacific Rim type suit that I operate through dance, and I'm gonna walk over the Pacific Ocean, to lend a hand.
Well, so yeah, listeners, you might be able to see Veronica doing that on the news.
Yeah, say hi.
But we will see you sometime soon. Maybe you're listening to this. Maybe you're watching it. We're going to keep experimenting with visuals, try to figure out some way to make that fun. But, hey, I think we've all had a religious experience today, and I think we've all transcended.
Exactly. And if you suffered through this episode, dear listener, it kind of means you made it to a higher level of being, right? That was your passion. The passion of the pod.
If you're just listening and not watching the visual feed, you missed that I've been self-flagellating this entire time.
Yes. And I mean, it was as visually gripping as anything that you have seen in the Passion of
My
Christ.
back is so bloody right now. Oh boy, I'm going to go put some ice on that. So why don't we call it a day?
All right. Bye.
Toot toot.
Toot toot.